It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done.
That's why I'm more interested not in how the Egyptians built the pyramids, but how the pyramids helped to build Egypt.
Scientists believed they had already figured out how the ancient Egyptians carved granite. Copper tools, stone hammers, and thousands of exhausting workers. So they entered the well-known Aswan Quarry evidence into Grok AI, expecting the system to support what history books had always claimed. It disagreed. The response it gave was so different from what the researchers imagined that it left the entire room silent. Because if the AI's analysis is correct, the patterns cut into that stone may not have been created by the people history says created them. So what exactly did it discover? Stay with me. Because once you see the detail hidden in the stone, you cannot look away from it. The Aswan Granite Enigma. Along the shores of the Nile in southern Egypt, there is a location that has quietly challenged scientists and historians for many years. It is known as the Aswan Granite Quarry. From a distance, it appears almost ordinary. Massive unfinished blocks, scattered stone, and the endless quiet of the desert covering everything around it. The kind of place a visitor might walk through and leave within minutes. But the moment you get close to the rock, that simple impression begins to disappear. Look closely at the stone itself. Because the stone is where the real mystery begins. This is not fragile limestone or soft sandstone. This is granite. Granite ranks around 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, meaning it is incredibly resistant to cutting, and even with today's advanced industrial machines, shaping it remains a difficult task. Anyone who works with granite will tell you it can feel tougher than normal steel. Remember that detail, because everything that comes next depends on it. Now examine what has actually been carved into this granite. Long, smooth, curved lines stretch across the surface with almost perfect spacing. They appear as if something moved over the stone in one steady, continuous motion. In some areas, the marks blend together like waves moving across calm water. No rough fractures. No random damage. No uneven, broken pattern that you would expect from a human hand becoming tired over time. Nearly everyone who sees these marks for the first time has the same reaction. They move closer, become silent, and ask the same question. Could these really be thousands of years old? Because at first glance, they look exactly like the result of a modern machine. And that feeling, that something about this place does not match the story we know, is exactly where the mystery begins to unfold. The ancient explanation. For centuries, history books have presented one simple and familiar explanation. The ancient Egyptians, they say, did not rely on any unknown technology to shape this stone. Instead, they used dolerite, an extremely hard rock, sometimes linked with diorite, formed into heavy pounding tools and stone hammers. Workers struck the granite repeatedly, hour after hour, until the rock slowly gave way and took the desired form. This remains the explanation taught in many classrooms today. The size of this effort is truly overwhelming. Khufu's pyramid reaches almost the height of a 50-story tower. Historians believe that thousands upon thousands of workers passed through these quarries, with estimates often reaching around 20,000 people, including about 15,000 rotating through different shifts so the work could continue without stopping. The labor was described as brutal. Workers hitting stone for nearly 12 hours at a time, day after day, for months and even years, before a massive block finally separated from the ground. At first glance, the theory seems reasonable. Give enough workers a nearly impossible mission, provide enough time, and even the greatest challenges begin to seem achievable. That argument has logic, and it deserves consideration. The problem appeared when some researchers stopped discussing the idea and decided to recreate it themselves. They built copies of the tools described in historical records. They brought in experienced craftsmen and had them strike large granite blocks thousands of times, following the traditional explanation exactly. Everyone expected the stone to develop the same kind of ancient markings. But it did not. The marks created by the hammers were uneven and chaotic. Some strikes carved deeper, while others only touched the surface. Each impact created a different result. In certain areas, the edges broke apart. In others, the stone cracked and chipped away. There was no perfect rhythm. No smooth curve pattern. Only the natural inconsistency of human work. And the most important part of the experiment was not just that it failed. It was the way it failed. The more effort the workers applied, the more irregular the stone became. Faster movement created more mistakes, not fewer. Within a short time, exhaustion appeared. Hands weakened, spacing changed, and the pattern slowly drifted, because that is what happens when humans repeat the same motion again and again. They started the experiment hoping to prove the traditional explanation. Instead, they quietly challenged the one thing everyone thought was already solved. Now compare that result with the actual marks found at Aswan, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The real cuts appear as if a tool moved across the granite in one controlled path at a constant speed. Long curved lines. Almost identical spacing. A level of accuracy that seems difficult to achieve by hand, because every human body has limits. People become tired. Every movement changes slightly. Every strike shifts in angle. That variation is not failure, it is simply human nature. Yet in the Aswan markings, that normal human inconsistency is almost completely missing. And this is where the traditional explanation and the evidence in the stone begin to separate. The AI analysis revealed. When researchers realized the traditional explanation could not completely account for the markings, they decided to approach the mystery in a new way. Instead of depending on human judgment or old assumptions, they gave the entire problem to an artificial intelligence and asked it to examine the evidence without any expectation of a specific answer. First, they created the data through a process known as photogrammetry. Thousands of detailed overlapping photographs were combined into accurate three-dimensional digital versions of the quarry surfaces. These models could be rotated, enlarged, and examined from every possible angle with extreme precision. The complete dataset was then placed into Grok AI's analysis system, designed to compare the marks against the patterns created by different types of tools. And this detail is important. The AI was never informed that the location was Egypt. It was never told which tools researchers believed were used, and it was never guided toward any conclusion. Its only task was to study the patterns and compare them with thousands of known tool signatures, both ancient and modern, stored in its system. It analyzed 847 individual cuts. For every mark, it studied the curve, the radius of the arc, and the angle where the tool appeared to meet the stone. It measured the depth, the distance between nearby cuts, and the overall consistency throughout the entire area. A process like this would take a human research team years to complete. But that is the advantage of a machine: it does not become tired, and it does not search for a preferred result. A human researcher arrives at Aswan already knowing the traditional explanation. They expect hammers, so they naturally look for evidence of hammers. The AI had none of those expectations. It only examined shapes, measurements, angles, and depths, comparing them with every example it had learned from. Then the final report appeared, and one number immediately stood out. Across all 847 cuts found throughout different sections of the quarry, the total variation was only 4.3%. That was the number that made everyone stop. In normal conversation, it sounds incredibly small. But from an engineering perspective, it becomes something far more unusual. Even a highly skilled craftsman repeating the same movement will naturally change over time. The hand shifts slightly, the angle moves, and the force is never exactly identical. That is why even skilled modern manual work commonly shows variation between 12 and 20%. Reaching 22% would not surprise engineers. Humans are not machines. Yet here were hundreds of cuts across a massive quarry showing only 4.3% difference. The AI discovered that the consistency was not only in spacing. The entry angles were remarkably similar as well, almost as if every movement followed a planned path and was carried out with mechanical accuracy. It no longer looked like the work of one person, or even thousands of workers. It looked more like a single controlled system repeating the same action again and again. And that was the moment the mystery changed. It was no longer just an archaeological question. It became an engineering problem. If human hands usually create 12 to 22% variation, but these marks show only 4.3%, then the question remains: who created them? And what tool did they use? The tool that matched the marks. After the AI completed its measurements, the next phase became even more revealing. The system now had to determine which tool these markings most closely matched. It compared the patterns against thousands of different examples, from simple handheld hammers, to Bronze Age tools, all the way to the most advanced industrial cutting machines used today. First, it examined the traditional stone hammer theory. The result was the same problem again. Hammer impacts are naturally inconsistent. Depth changes. Angles shift with every strike. But the Aswan markings showed almost identical spacing and a repeated, controlled pattern that simple pounding could not create. So the system moved toward modern cutting methods, and three possibilities quickly stood above the rest. The first match came from diamond rotary cutters, machines using diamond-coated edges that rotate at high speed while cutting through stone, creating smooth and highly consistent lines even in granite. The second match came from water jet technology, which uses an extremely powerful stream of water mixed with abrasive material to carve stone with incredible control. The third, and perhaps the most surprising, was ultrasonic cutting, a process where a blade vibrates at frequencies beyond human hearing, allowing extremely precise cuts. The difference between these methods and a basic hammer is not only the ability to cut. It is the ability to repeat the exact same action again and again. A machine does not become exhausted after hundreds of passes. It does not lose its position. It does not slowly change its angle. The 800th cut can look almost identical to the first. And that pattern, that almost unnatural level of consistency, was exactly what the AI kept detecting in the Aswan markings. Then Grok AI produced its confidence result, and once again the room went silent. The closest match for the Aswan cuts was an industrial rotary cutting method. Confidence level, approximately 94%. Think about that. But the AI found something else as well. Across hundreds of cuts spread throughout different areas of the quarry, the angle where the tool entered the stone changed by less than 2 degrees. Hundreds of marks. Different locations. Yet the tool approached the granite at nearly the exact same angle every single time. Achieving that level of accuracy manually is considered almost impossible. And this is where the mystery became much deeper for the researchers. Because the tools that best matched these marks, diamond rotary systems, high-pressure water cutting, and ultrasonic machines, all belong to the modern industrial era. There is no known record, no discovered equipment, and no clear evidence of this type of technology existing in the civilization believed to have created the quarry. On one side is traditional history, saying only basic stone tools were available. On the other side is an AI analysis suggesting the evidence resembles the result of a highly controlled industrial process. The distance between those two ideas is where the real mystery begins. And it is about to become even more difficult to explain. The shafts that shouldn't be possible. There is one detail at Aswan that almost everyone overlooks. And honestly, it may be the part that creates the biggest problem. Hidden throughout the site are deep, narrow shafts dropping nearly 30 to 50 feet straight into the granite, with many openings only around 3 to 4 feet wide. From the surface, they appear to be nothing more than simple holes. But once you examine the inside walls, the entire picture changes. Inside those shaft walls are the same smooth, curved, spiral-like cuts found across the open quarry above. The same depth. The same pattern. The same shape. And that is exactly what creates the mystery. Because consider this. If the traditional explanation is correct, and these cuts were created by workers swinging heavy dolerite hammers, then those workers would need enough space to move. They would require at least 18 to 24 inches of clearance just to pull the hammer back and generate enough force to break through granite. Remove that movement, and you remove the power. A heavy dolerite stone pressed against granite without a proper swing would accomplish almost nothing. The entire hammer method depends on momentum. Take away the swing, and the technique no longer works. That means these shafts are not simply difficult places to work. They are locations where the very tool history says was used should not have been physically possible. And yet the work was clearly completed. Inside these narrow passages, there is barely enough room for a person to stand comfortably, much less perform a powerful hammer strike. Granite surrounds every side. The space is deep, confined, and extremely restrictive. But somehow, the markings inside those shafts match the cuts found in the wide-open quarry areas above, created with the same level of accuracy and control. When the shaft information was analyzed by Grok AI, the system examined the limited space, the cutting angles, the hardness of the granite, and the movement required for a hammer strike. Then it reached a conclusion that pushed the debate into a completely different territory. It classified the situation as physically impossible under those spatial conditions. A tool that requires a backward swing before impact could not realistically operate inside such a narrow space. But a system applying force directly from the front, without needing any backswing, could create the same type of marks even in the tightest areas. And that quietly challenges the only method that traditional explanations say was used: the stone's hidden signature. Until now, everything focused on what could be seen on the outside of the granite. But the next discovery came from looking beneath the surface. When extremely hard stone is repeatedly struck with a heavy tool, the material begins to break apart. Scientists call this fracturing. Tiny crystals inside the rock split in random directions, edges become uneven, and small cracks spread deeper into the stone. Under magnification, hammered granite looks almost like a tiny battlefield. Broken fragments. Stress marks. Random damage everywhere. But the Aswan markings showed something completely different. When researchers examined them closely, they found a surface that did not appear damaged at all. Instead, it looked precisely cut. In technical terms, this is known as a shear pattern, a sharp and controlled boundary separating the cut area from the untouched stone beside it. It did not resemble something that had been struck. It looked as if the material had been carefully separated along an intentional path. And below the cut itself, there was almost no deep damage spreading into the granite. If heavy hammers had created these marks, cracks should have continued downward into the stone. But they were missing. The force appeared to have been focused on one exact location rather than spreading through the material. Then came another discovery: the spirals. Under stronger magnification, researchers noticed extremely fine circular patterns. Faint marks suggesting that a rotating tool had moved across the granite while continuously spinning in the same direction. Samples taken from completely different areas of the quarry showed the same spiral movement. After that, scientists identified signs of thermal change, tiny sections on the cut surfaces showing concentrated heat. Not the broad heat expected from two stones rubbing together, but a small, focused heat point created by a rotating contact surface. The signature of friction from a fast-moving blade. Then came the particles. Microscopic traces of corundum appeared, a mineral rated around 9 on the Mohs hardness scale and commonly used today in industrial abrasive cutting tools. In some locations, researchers also detected carbon structures that some described as resembling diamond-like material. Any single piece of evidence could be debated. But when all of them appeared together, the pattern became much harder to dismiss. The spiraling marks. The clean separation. The lack of deep fractures. The concentrated heat. The extremely hard abrasive particles. When Grok AI analyzed all of these details together, the result matched the previous findings in a way that was difficult to ignore. This did not resemble the marks left by simple hammers or Bronze Age stone tools. The closest match was a process similar to modern industrial diamond abrasive rotary cutting. Under the microscope, the granite did not look like it had been smashed apart. It looked like it had been engineered. The timeline that turned backward. When researchers attempted to determine the age of these markings, the mystery did not become easier to understand. It became even more unusual. Across different areas of the quarry are ancient paintings made with red ochre, and the important detail is that these paintings appear directly over the cutting marks. That sequence changes everything. The stone was carved first. Only much later did someone add the artwork on top of it. When the paintings were examined and dated, some researchers suggested they could be close to 2,000 years older than Egypt's early dynastic period. And if those paintings truly belonged to such an ancient time, then the cuts beneath them would have to be even older. That pushes the timeline back into what is known as the pre-dynastic era, a period when, according to mainstream history, the region was occupied by smaller groups using only basic stone tools. And this is where the mystery becomes much harder to explain. The AI compared the structure and geometry of the cuts with their estimated ages through what it called a temporal precision analysis. The result was the complete opposite of what history would normally predict. With roughly 91% confidence, the analysis showed that the older the cuts appeared to be, the more accurate and consistent they became. As time moved closer to the present, the markings seemed to become less precise and more irregular. The cuts believed to be the oldest looked the most advanced. The newer ones appeared closer to ordinary human craftsmanship. The AI examined this pattern statistically, and according to the report, the relationship reached the 99th percentile of significance, suggesting the pattern was extremely unlikely to be random across the entire dataset. Normally, civilizations improve their technology over time. Early creations are rough. Later creations become more refined. But Aswan appears to show the opposite. The oldest work appears to be the most precise, while the level of skill seems to decline as centuries pass. And that leaves behind a question that is almost impossible to ignore. What if the people at the very beginning already understood something that later generations completely lost? Understanding the hidden structure of stone. Until this point, the main mystery was how ancient people managed to cut granite with such incredible precision. But the AI uncovered something that made the question even deeper. Whoever created these cuts did not seem to be working only with what was visible on the outside. It appeared they already understood what was hidden inside the stone before making the first cut. Granite is not a completely even material. Deep within it are different mineral layers, harder sections, natural weak points, and hidden lines where the rock can separate more easily. Engineers refer to these as grain boundaries and internal weak zones. Today, modern quarries use advanced tools like sonar scanning, ground surveys, and computer-based geological models to locate these hidden features. They use that information to plan cuts along the easiest and most efficient paths. But many of the ancient cuts at Aswan appear to follow those same natural weak zones, almost as if the builders already knew which areas of the granite were strongest and which areas would open more easily, without using any modern scanning equipment. Cutting granite with a powerful tool is one challenge. Knowing exactly where to cut before you even begin is a completely different problem. The outside of a granite block reveals almost nothing about the mineral patterns hidden beneath the surface. Today, we need special instruments that can look underground to understand those structures. To repeatedly follow those internal paths by hand, without seeing them, and choose the easiest route again and again would require unbelievable luck, or some unknown method of understanding the hidden structure of the stone itself. When Grok AI compared the mineral patterns on the surface with the locations of the cuts, it found a noticeable connection. The analysis suggested with around 88% confidence that the cutting paths were likely chosen based on the internal structure of the granite. Some researchers have referred to this idea as the stone reading theory, the possibility that these builders had some way of understanding the hidden design of a rock before they ever began shaping it. And if that possibility is true, then it leads to the next major question. If these builders were truly this advanced, why is there a massive unfinished monument still abandoned in the middle of the quarry? The unfinished giant and the lost method. There is one object at Aswan that causes almost everyone to ask the same question the moment they see it. If the work was progressing so successfully, why was it suddenly abandoned? The unfinished obelisk, believed to be the largest attempt of its kind, still remains connected to the original bedrock where it was carved thousands of years ago. If completed, it would have weighed more than 1,000 tons. The traditional explanation from archaeology is straightforward. A major crack appeared in the stone during construction, forcing the workers to leave the project behind. That explanation sounds reasonable. But when researchers examined the obelisk more closely, the details became harder to match. The cutting marks continue beyond the area where the crack appears. The work seems to have continued even after the damage was already present. If the crack was truly the reason the project ended, then the markings should have stopped exactly there. But they did not. And the marks on this unfinished monument are identical to those found throughout the rest of Aswan. The same curve patterns. The same consistent spacing. The same level of precision, even in the lower sections where the available working space becomes extremely limited. The quality does not decrease. So what actually brought a 1,000-ton project to a sudden stop, leaving no one to return and complete it? History still does not provide a clear answer. And the mystery does not end at one quarry. The same unusual markings appear at other ancient locations across Egypt. When researchers compared the Aswan data with the Giza complex, especially the Valley Temple of Khafre, one of the oldest and most mysterious granite structures in the region, the same microscopic features appeared again. Clean-cut boundaries. Very little internal damage. Subtle curve patterns suggesting a rotating tool. The AI directly compared the Giza markings with the Aswan cuts and found the difference was less than 5%. Different locations. Different stones. Almost the same cutting process. When Grok AI combined the complete dataset from across Egypt, it produced a conclusion with roughly 89% confidence. This did not appear to be an isolated event at a single quarry. It suggested that, sometime in the distant past, the same advanced cutting method may have been used across the region, and then disappeared. A single skilled workshop could possibly explain one location. A small group of master craftsmen sharing a technique could also be imagined. But the same unique signature appearing hundreds of kilometers apart, on different monuments and different stones, with less than 5% variation, suggests something much larger. Not just a workshop. A standardized method. The kind of consistency that comes from an entire system using the same tools and the same process. And somehow, that method vanished so completely from history that for centuries we believed it was never there at all. The question history cannot ignore. So now we arrive at the question that refuses to disappear. If the oldest work truly appears to be the most advanced, then what happens to the belief that technology always develops in a straight line forward? That is the problem this entire mystery keeps returning to. The traditional stone hammer explanation continues to struggle. No one has successfully recreated markings that truly match the precision and consistency found throughout the quarry. The discussion remains open, and many experts become noticeably cautious when asked for a simple explanation. Maybe our understanding of the timeline is incomplete. Maybe there is a lost chapter of history waiting to be uncovered. Or maybe the answer is something we have not yet been willing to consider. Whatever the truth may be, the stone itself is not changing. The marks remain exactly where they were left. That 4.3% consistency is still there. And it no longer feels like the evidence is waiting for history to explain it. It feels more like the evidence is challenging history, removing old assumptions one cut at a time, waiting for someone to finally pay attention. Now I want to hear your thoughts. After everything we have explored, do you think this points to lost technology, a mistake in dating, or something beyond what we currently understand? Share your theory in the comments. I read them, and some of the most interesting ideas often come from you. And if you believe the past still holds secrets we have not uncovered, subscribe and turn on notifications so you are here when the next mystery finally comes to the surface.